The crime scene was inside an old 6-story apartment building. Most of the owners had already moved elsewhere, leaving the vacant units for rent. As I bent down and slipped under the barrier tape, Feng Wei came to meet me. He was the first police officer to arrive at the scene. "How's the situation?" I stopped walking and asked. After several phone calls reminding the tenant to pay the rent but getting no answer, around 10 o'clock this morning the landlord went directly to room 401 and discovered that the victim was already dead inside. "Has the victim's identity been confirmed yet?" "Yes. The victim was 45 years old, originally from Province S. He had been working in this city for 23 years and rarely returned to his hometown. He had rented this room for 10 years, usually taking construction labor jobs, so his finances were always tight." "Did the victim live alone?" "He used to live with his family, but for some reason his wife and children left more than 10 years ago, and after that, he never remarried. I heard from the command center that it was a homicide. You'll see for yourself in a moment, the body looks strange. When I first arrived at the scene, just one glance was enough for me to report to my superiors and start the investigation right away. Now I'm contacting everyone on the victim's list of acquaintances. Have you found anything yet?" The victim had been working in this city for more than 20 years just to make a living, but he didn't have many acquaintances. Fortunately, there's a surveillance camera outside that records everyone going in and out of the building. We've reviewed the footage from the past 5 days, but since the exact time of death is still unknown, we're waiting for your examination to determine it. Feng Wei pointed to a spot not far from us, where a camera was aimed directly at the entrance on the first floor of the apartment building, the only way in or out. During that period, 6 people came to see the victim, 4 men and 2 women. 2 men who visited together 4 days ago were co-workers from the construction site. We questioned them separately, and both said that on that night they had invited the victim out for drinks. They claimed he seemed normal, showing nothing unusual. Another visitor was the victim's supervisor from the construction site, who came the day before to ask if he wanted to take on a new job. The victim declined, saying he wasn't feeling well. The supervisor mentioned that he saw a strange woman inside the apartment that day. Finally, there was a loan shark, a very suspicious character. He said that yesterday afternoon he came to collect a debt, but while climbing the stairs he received a sudden phone call about an urgent matter and had to leave before meeting the victim. Of the 2 women, one was a prostitute who had come the night before. She claimed the victim had called her over, and while they were having dinner, a man arrived to assign the victim a job. The victim refused. After the supervisor left, she and the victim had sex. The other woman was the victim's lover. His phone still contained a record of their conversations. She testified that yesterday she bought some ready-made food, intending to have dinner with him. But, after knocking on the door repeatedly without an answer, she assumed he was out and left. That was the extent of it, until today, when the landlord discovered the body. Are there any issues with the statements? For now, there's no evidence to confirm they're telling the truth, but the statements from the 2 co-workers and the supervisor seem fairly credible, since there were witnesses. And what about the prostitute? According to the statements we've just heard, she was the last person to have contact with the victim. That night, she even received money from the victim through WeChat. But that can't be taken as an alibi, because she could have simply used the victim's phone to transfer the money to herself. I nodded, impressed by the efficiency of the investigative team. In just 1 hour since the body was discovered, they had already pieced together so much. I thought to myself, if those people were telling the truth, then the earliest possible time of death must have been after the previous night. I asked again, what was the nature of his relationship with the mistress? She testified that she and the victim had been involved with each other for nearly 6 years. Back in her hometown, she had a husband and children, but in the city she lived alone while working, so she sought companionship. Their relationship was fairly steady, and several of the victim's co-workers at the construction site were aware of it. I had heard stories of many migrant laborers who found themselves temporary spouses, living together without making the relationship public. When holidays came, each would return to their own family home. Finally, there's the loan shark. He's the most suspicious of them all, with a prior conviction for assaulting someone while collecting a debt. All right, I understand the situation. Let's go upstairs to examine the scene and the body first. I lifted the toolbox and started up the stairs. The moment I stepped into the scene, I saw the strange corpse Feng Wei had mentioned. The man lay on his back, head tilted slightly to the right, with a stream of black fluid trickling from the corner of his mouth, running down to the floor before drying. As I approached, a sharp odor hit me. His jaws were clenched tight, crushing the tongue that protruded slightly. Around his nose was a ring of white froth, what forensic science calls foam mushroom, one of the signs of drowning. Yet the body was lying on dry ground, clothes neat and clean, with no trace of contact with water. The posture was even more bizarre. Hands curled like claws, arms crossed over the chest, legs drawn up, knees nearly touching the torso, the whole body stiffened. If the corpse were flipped over instead of lying on its back, it would resemble a werewolf revealed under a full moon. Truly uncanny, something I had never seen before. I felt both astonished and uneasy. Another murder case, and one that promised to be a formidable challenge. Since the scene was indoors, I could conduct a preliminary examination right there. I slipped on my gloves and began inspecting the corpse that looked as if it had come from another world. The lips were dark purple, abnormal at first glance. Across the face ran streaks of blackish purple beneath the skin, intertwining like roots, stretching all the way behind the ears. The pronounced congestion on the victim's eyelids was a clear sign of suffocation, yet there were no marks of strangulation or pressure on the neck. Suspecting an obstruction of the upper airway, I used tweezers to part the lips and discovered 3 small tears on the tongue. That was enough to confirm the hypothesis. The victim had died from suffocation caused by blockage of the upper respiratory tract. Any findings on the body? As I continued my examination, Captain Ju Yu Ji of the forensic team arrived at the scene. Congested eyelids, torn tongue. It appears the victim suffocated due to an obstruction of the upper airway. That's all for now. No other signs have surfaced to confirm it with certainty. Why is there foam around the nose? That usually happens only in drowning victims. You see, there isn't a single drop of water at the scene. Mechanical asphyxia can sometimes produce foam as well. It's not exclusive to drowning. What's that black stuff flowing out of his mouth? It doesn't seem to be blood. The odor is strange, possibly regurgitated stomach fluid, but it can't be confirmed yet. The death posture is truly strange, Ju Yu-Zi remarked in surprise as well. Exactly. He must have suffered terribly before death. So many suspicious details. The foam, the black fluid, the corpse's posture. Everything is strange. Any other findings at the scene? First, let's move the body to the morgue. We'll examine the scene more thoroughly, and the rest can wait until the autopsy. Dissection will likely be necessary, I replied. While we were talking, Feng Wei had already called a few men to place the body in a bag and load it onto the morgue's vehicle. Now we could focus on examining the scene. Leaving the corpse here gave me the chills. Unfortunately, after surveying the scene, we found no further clues. Aside from the mason's tools, the room contained only a bed, a wardrobe, and a set of table and chairs, all old and dilapidated. I pulled open the top drawer of the wooden wardrobe and discovered a pile of medicine inside. At the bottom lay several medical records bearing the victim's name, evidence that his health had not been good. The medical record contained a history of consultations, the first dating back 4 years, the most recent just 2 months ago when he collected his medication. Tucked inside was a discharge paper, clearly noting the diagnosis of post-rheumatic heart valve disease from 2 years prior, along with a list of prescribed drugs, the very bottles stacked in the drawer. Post-rheumatic heart valve disease. I felt a twinge of uncertainty, wondering if the victim's death might be connected to his history of heart trouble. Based solely on the information uncovered so far, ruling this out as murder would make it difficult to explain the strange signs on the body. Yet, if it is homicide, then everyone who had visited the victim falls under suspicion, though no evidence has yet surfaced to identify the true killer. The corpse itself remains baffling. A posture unlike anything I've seen, foam appearing in a dry scene, signs of suffocation without a clear cause. And the history of heart disease only deepens the mystery of his death. I also considered the possibility that the victim succumbed to a recurrence of his heart condition, but it is far too soon to draw a definitive conclusion. The urgent task now is to determine whether the victim died from a recurrence of heart disease or from foul play. This is no simple matter. I dread cases involving victims with medical histories, especially when the challenge is to distinguish whether death was caused by illness or external injury. Such cases are maddening. The image of the corpse's darkened face and claw-like hands kept haunting me, and I shook my head to drive away the tangled thoughts. To uncover the answers to all these questions, we would have to ask the dead himself. Once the field team arrived, I headed to the morgue with the colleague in charge of photography, preparing for a more thorough examination of the body. On the way, I dug deeper into information about post-rheumatic heart valve disease. It is a common valvular condition, the aftermath of acute myocarditis in rheumatic fever. One of its most serious complications is impaired blood flow from the lungs to the heart, causing a large volume of fluid to accumulate in the alveoli, lung tissue, and bronchioles, blocking airflow from the lungs and disrupting gas exchange. Could the foam have come from that? The thought flickered in my mind like a dim spark in the night. But if suffocation wasn't the cause of death, then what was? Why are there signs of asphyxia? And that bizarre posture, along with the black fluid, so many questions remain unanswered. The moment I arrived at the morgue, I plunged straight into the autopsy. The rigor mortis had passed, and the body now lay straight and still upon the dissection table. I fixed my gaze on those tightly shut eyes and whispered, "Tell me your story. Tell me everything you wish to reveal, so we can bring the truth into the light." After another meticulous external examination, I pressed the scalpel lightly against the edge of the chin. The blade traced a straight line down the chest, across the abdomen, curving past the navel and stopping near the pubic bone. As I opened the abdominal cavity, a sharp, familiar odor drifted up. When I cut into the stomach, the smell grew stronger. The word poisoning flashed in my mind. Sure enough, when I opened the stomach, the contents were black and viscous, identical to the substance that had leaked from the corpse's mouth. I immediately sealed the fluid in an evidence container. If the victim truly died from poisoning, this would be the most crucial proof. I separated the stomach, rinsed it clean, and found the mucosa speckled with red, likely hemorrhages caused by contact with the toxin. Beyond the breakthrough findings in the stomach, the victim's brain and lungs were severely edematous. The heart was markedly enlarged, myocardial tissue showed hemorrhages, and the lungs were overflowing with foam. It seemed highly likely the victim had died from poisoning. If so, who would be the prime suspect? I pondered. According to the statements of those under suspicion, the victim had shared a meal with 2 colleagues, then spent time with a prostitute. She would have had the easiest opportunity to slip poison into his food. Yet I suddenly recalled. Later that evening, the foreman came by to assign work, but the victim refused, saying he felt unwell. Could that have been the first sign of poisoning? This detail was far too significant to overlook. The poison used, what was it? I mentally reviewed the poisons that could produce symptoms resembling the state of the corpse. Yet it would be reckless to speculate before the laboratory delivers its final conclusion. With the autopsy complete, I reported my findings to Captain Ju Yu-ji. Poisoning? He was clearly startled. Do we know what the toxin was? I've collected the stomach fluid. It'll be sent for analysis shortly. When will the results be ready? At best, it'll take 2 days. Understood. Captain Ju Yu Chi hung up the phone. I had just packed my tools into the car when he called again. "We can't wait that long. Isn't there a faster way? The higher-ups are pressing. If this is murder, we can't sit idle for 2 days. The investigation team has no starting point. If we suspect poisoning, we need to know what kind of toxin, so the men can chase down leads. That's the only way to crack the case quickly. You must give me at least a rough plan." His tone was half consultative, half commanding. I felt uneasy, yet an idea surfaced. "There is a way, but it's rather cruel." Hearing my hesitation, he pressed, "What way?" I replied, "Catch some rats, test the poison on them." I had just returned to the office when Luong Tan rushed in carrying a cage. "Here, it's for you." "So quick, where did you get them?" I glanced at the frightened rats scurrying nervously inside the cage. "Never mind where I got them, just take it. Captain Ju Yu Chi said you needed them, and he's pressing hard." "Okay." I took the cage. Back in college, I had conducted experiments with white mice, but since graduation, I hadn't dealt with such small creatures. Carrying the cage into the adjoining laboratory, I then called Captain Ju Yu Chi. "Want to come over and watch some magic?" "Yes, I'm coming right over. Wait a moment." A few minutes later, Captain Ju Yu Chi and Luong Tan walked in. I tossed them 2 3M masks. "Put these on, or you won't be able to stand the smell in a moment." Both obediently put on their masks, switched on the police camera, raised their cameras, and stood ready. I opened the transparent evidence bag in the corner of the room, pulled out a white vial, and that familiar odor spread through the air once again. "What's that?" Ju Yu Chi frowned, looking displeased. "Stomach fluid from the corpse," I replied calmly. "Ah, that's disgusting," he grimaced. Ignoring him, I opened the vial and peeled the wrapper off a syringe. "You can tell just by looking." As I spoke, I drew a small amount of black mucus from the vial, then replaced the original needle with a 15mm one. My eyes fixed on the rats scurrying nervously in the cage. "Don't be afraid, little ones." "You're really twisted, huh?" Ju Yu Chi exclaimed again. "I told you when you pushed me. This method is cruel. If it weren't sheer desperation, I'd never want to do it." All right, just get on with it." Wearing thick cloth gloves on my left hand, I opened the top of the cage and grabbed one by the back, pinching its neck firmly between my thumb and forefinger. That way I held its head steady, forcing the rat to tilt back so its mouth and esophagus lined up straight. Perfect for the syringe. I felt a grim satisfaction that the lessons from college hadn't gone to waste. Left hand restraining the rat, right hand raising the syringe, I aimed carefully and slid the needle deep into its mouth. Once it reached the stomach, I pushed in the corpse's stomach fluid, laced with deadly poison. I repeated the procedure on 2 rats, leaving one aside. "Done. Now we wait," I said. "How long?" "If quick, just a few minutes." Holding my breath, I watched the 2 white rats. They likely had no idea what was happening, and guilt gnawed at me. Both scurried along the edge of the cage, pawing at their mouths as if trying to vomit. One actually did. Black, slimy fluid dripped onto the wood shavings, an unsettling sight, identical to the substance that had leaked from the victim's mouth. The wait wasn't long. Within minutes, both rats showed symptoms, white foam bubbling from their mouths, pawing at their faces, then suddenly thrashing, darting wildly around the cage. The untouched rat cowered in the corner, trembling. 2 minutes later, the test subject's legs stiffened. They staggered, collapsed, limbs stretched rigid, convulsing non-stop. The spasms lasted over a minute until both lay still. Their death posture mirrored the victims, like miniature werewolves frozen in place. "These 2 died so fast? What poison is that?" Ju Yu Chi was stunned, whether from watching the rats perish in an instant or from the terrifying potency of the fluid itself. Judging by their symptoms, this toxin is designed for creatures like them. Rat poison? Rat poison or fluoroacetamide? Investigate along that line, I concluded. I know. Ju Yu-zi pulled out his phone, tore off the mask, and rushed out of the lab. Halfway down the hall, he suddenly remembered something and came back. Then what about the victim's strange posture? Is that also a symptom of rat poison? You saw it yourself. The posture of those two rats was identical to the victim's. I leaned on the table, pitying the last trembling rat curled in the corner, and sighed. The corpse's face was dark purple, with foul black fluid leaking from the mouth. I should have thought of poisoning right away. But the body's bizarre posture, along with a few unusual details, threw me off. In truth, biting down on the tongue and limbs contracting are just signs of convulsions before death. Same as the rats, only lasting longer. The medical term is paroxysmal involuntary convulsions. Among common poisons, rat poison produces similar symptoms. Of course, this is only my guess. For certainty, we'll have to wait for the lab analysis. Ju Yu-ji nodded. But here's what I still don't get. If it really was rat poison, then why the foam? That detail puzzled me for a long time, I admitted. There wasn't a drop of water anywhere near the scene, yet the corpse showed signs of drowning. That's what made this body so intriguing. First, let me be clear. Foam is indeed one of the key symptoms in drowning victims, but it isn't exclusive to drowning. Other causes of death, like suffocation, can also produce it. The victim had another complication, rheumatic heart disease, which often leads to pulmonary edema, a severe condition. Rat poison also causes pulmonary edema, but during autopsy I found the swelling far worse than usual. So, have you figured out where the foam came from? You mean from excess fluid in the lungs? Exactly. That's where the water came from. The victim's lungs contained fluid which produced the foam. This point is the easiest to misinterpret, and also the most crucial. Foam forms in drowning cases because breathing continues for a while, mixing air with liquid drawn into the airway. In other words, foam takes time to develop. The victim doesn't die instantly. If someone is strangled, suffocated, or smothered, death comes in under 5 minutes, with little to no breathing activity, so foam doesn't appear. From the corpse's condition, we can rule out strangulation or suffocation, meaning the victim was still breathing for some time before death. Rat poison fits perfectly with this reasoning. After ingesting it, the victim would show symptoms right away, but death wouldn't come for 30 minutes to 3 hours. During that time, heavy breathing worsens pulmonary edema, mixing air with excess fluid in the lungs, churning together to form the foam. The two of them looked at me as if I were spinning a novel out of thin air. Fair enough. Poison, striking at the exact moment a heart condition flared up, was almost too coincidental to believe. Besides the foam, the body had another curious detail. Congestion in both eyelids, which easily misleads people into thinking of mechanical asphyxiation. But in truth, rat poison also causes respiratory failure, different only in that it's internal. Rat poison can lead to hemorrhages in the conjunctiva of the eyelids and eyeballs. The tears on the tongue might suggest the victim was gagged, but in fact, they were self-inflicted during convulsions, much like epileptic seizures. That too is a symptom of rat poison. This is everything the corpse has to tell us. The strange details of this corpse were both baffling and tightly connected, giving me quite a struggle. Now that the explanation was complete, I breathed a sigh of relief, exhales sharply, unable to hide my reflection. After so many years in forensic work, examining countless bizarre bodies, there are still times I'm left scratching my head. Yet the signs on a corpse are always crucial evidence. They never appear without reason. They are, in fact, the victim's final, last words left behind at the moment of death. From the clues I provided, the investigation team searched every shop in the city that sold rat poison, pulled surveillance footage from those with recent buyers, and quickly identified the suspect. The killer was the victim's longtime mistress. On the morning before the body was discovered, she prepared a meal, laced one dish with poison, and brought it to his home. They ate together as usual. She watched the entire process of his death, and only after confirming he was gone did she clear away the food and pretend she had never entered. I already knew about their common-law relationship. For years they had carried on without incident, until the victim's rheumatic heart disease worsened. His health declined, he took fewer jobs, and money grew scarce, forcing him to rely more on her. Arguments over finances began. She wanted to leave, but he refused, even threatening to expose the affair to her husband and children, humiliating her publicly. The breaking point came when her husband planned to move to the city for work. Realizing she could no longer maintain the illicit relationship, she tried again to end it, but the victim wouldn't listen. Fearing exposure, she chose the worst solution of all. Message from the forensic examiner. Injuries and medical history. At first glance, this might not seem connected to the previous case. And that's true. I only borrowed a small detail from that investigation to lead into another story. As I mentioned earlier, whether on the living body or the corpse, injuries and medical history are the toughest riddles for a forensic pathologist, and no one in the field can escape them. I once performed an autopsy on an elderly man whose cause of death stemmed from something seemingly trivial. The victim owned a plot of farmland he rented out. In the first years, the tenant grew staple crops, but later he wanted to switch to grapes. The old man objected fiercely. The tenant grew resentful. "You rented me the land, you have no right to decide what I plant." So he went ahead, hauling bamboo poles to the field to build trellises. The old man tried to stop him, throwing the poles into the river. Tempers flared, voices rose, and soon they were fighting. The old man, frail with age, struck while retreating. The younger man never dared to hit with full force, only waved the pole to scare him. But fate intervened. The old man stumbled, fell backward, and struck the back of his head on the edge of the field. He lost consciousness instantly. Taken to the hospital, he remained in a coma for a week, never waking again until he passed away. If it had been a younger man, that fall would have meant nothing. But the elderly victim's cervical spine was severely degenerated, its natural curve lost. One stumble, and the vertebra slipped, severing the spinal cord, a fatal injury. How should the case be handled? From a forensic standpoint, it was straightforward. We didn't need to agonize over his medical history. Whatever illnesses he carried, the cause of death was clear. Dislocated vertebra, spinal cord rupture. The problem was that the tenant never imagined the old man's spine was so fragile that a single fall could end his life. But dealing with the tenant's responsibility belongs to the law, not to forensic science, so we'll set that aside. Let's return to the forensic theme. Sometimes the relationship between injury and medical history gives us headaches, most often with coronary heart disease. I once examined the body of a woman who had been struck in the head with a brick during a violent quarrel. She died 3 hours later. Autopsy revealed an open wound on the left side of her forehead, a fractured frontal bone, epidural hematoma, and herniation of the cerebellar tonsils. At the same time, there was a large amount of fat beneath the pericardium with severe atherosclerosis, grade 3 narrowing of the left coronary artery, grade 2 narrowing of the right. This corpse was a textbook case of injury combined with pre-existing disease. Considered separately, the skull fracture alone was enough to kill, or it could have triggered a fatal cardiac event. So how does the forensic examiner conclude the cause of death? The answer is critical. If the conclusion is frontal bone fracture, it means homicide. The suspect could face the highest penalty, even death. If the conclusion is heart disease, then it's an accident, and the suspect may bear no criminal responsibility. Civil compensation differs drastically between the two outcomes. Sometimes, when the distinction cannot be made clearly, we use a double-edged approach. The cause of death includes both. But then comes the hardest question tied to that conclusion, which was primary, the skull fracture or the heart disease. That is a thorny challenge for any forensic examiner. Even I cannot be certain I'd answer correctly, yet we are compelled to give an answer. In forensic work, it's common to encounter victims with pre-existing conditions. We must determine precisely the relationship between injury and disease. If both contribute to death, we must identify which is the primary cause. If the injury triggered the illness, or the illness triggered the fatal effect of the injury, we must make that clear. Saying this, you can imagine how complex the interplay between trauma and disease can be. In such cases, forensic examiners must be extremely cautious, because the conclusions we deliver will heavily influence the direction of the investigation and the entire trial that follows.